Hi, Amber. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kim. I'm absolutely excited to be with you.
Me too, because it's no surprise to the listeners that we're going to get into emotional eating, but you are an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert, and that's really exciting. And you have your own podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called the No Sugar Coating Podcast.
I love that name, by the way. I
Thank
knew it,
you.
but I wanted to hear you say it. I just think it's really cute and it goes along with what we're talking about. And I'm excited to get into something today. I think our listeners are so used to hearing about hormones, but in one particular way. So when we get into this next phase of it, I think they're going to be very surprised, and I'm excited for that, learning some new information. Those of us who are in the emotional eating space, we really come from it not just from a professional standpoint or certifications or, health coaching. There's always a personal story, and I would love to hear more about your background, the struggles and the triumphs of how you got to where you are today from that deeper, darker place.
Yeah. And it was very dark at the time. And at the time, I'm like, why am I going through this? I don't understand. And of course, it all unfolded. But essentially for me, I was an unconscious emotional eater. Even as a child, I just didn't know that that's what I was doing. Food became a coping mechanism at a very young age. And I think what really triggered it is just a couple of key highlights, in my childhood. The first one being when I was 5, it was my first day getting on the bus. We had just moved to the country and I was all excited to make friends. And then I get on the bus and all of a sudden all the older boys are calling me ugly and fat. And then the entire bus is making fun of me. So that really crushed any confidence I had, made me very insecure with my body. If strangers are saying it, it must be true. And that really developed my identity for the next 20 years of my life. My mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before I was born, and she had a really deep food addiction. I just didn't know it until I healed my own. And so there was always so much food available, and we would eat often as part of our relationship, the sugar, the baked goods, the treats, the fast food. And there was never any limits. It was like you could just eat what you wanted whenever you wanted. And I think that is part of what helped me build this addiction to sugar and reliance on food. And witnessing her decline at such a young age was absolutely so painful. And I felt so helpless that I couldn't do anything, and I didn't know how to process or feel that emotion. And being the only child, it just didn't really feel like I could. I just felt like it would be a burden if I had to go to my parents with something because they're already dealing with enough. So it kind of just kept everything to myself. And then of course you hit your tweens and teens and you start watching Hollywood and reading magazines and, all the fake photoshopping. You essentially get programmed that your body doesn't look good enough and to compare yourself. And then they sell you the quote unquote solution, the diet, the eat this way, do this diet, blah, 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 right? Do this exercise plan. And we're literally again, programmed that this is how you fix your body and look good enough so that you can be approved of by society. And so I got caught up in all of that and started dieting in my tweens. And then by my early 20s, I had my first memorable binge and fell deep into binge eating. I had a breakup, lost weight really quickly, was not eating enough. And of course, not eating enough and then adding in 2 hours of exercise a day, reached my quote unquote goal weight within a few months. And you're really conditioned by the weight loss industry, once you'll lose the weight, you'll finally be happy, which is such a lie. But when you're programmed with something long enough into your subconscious mind, you start to believe it. And so I lost them. This didn't fix anything. He doesn't want me back. What the heck? And so it just really, one night I went to a party and I was I'm just going to eat the salad, of course, in that diet mentality. And then I had some ice cream cake and it just triggered this. What I didn't know at the time was this massive dopamine high. And then all of a sudden my mind, my inner critic, the ego, which we'll get into, is you messed up. Who cares? The day is ruined. You might as well eat whatever you want. So have more ice cream cake. I had a burger and there was a whole bar of chocolate on the counter for s'mores. And I took it into the bathroom, ate the whole chocolate bar and left the party because I didn't want anyone to see that. I essentially stole it and ate it. Got fast food on the way home, binged until I was so full I was sick. And then the next day that triggered the all or nothing, which was now I've messed up, the shame, the guilt. I've got to go to the gym. I need to burn this all off. I can't gain weight. And then I gained 80 pounds in 4 months and fell deep into the binge purge cycle for a while because I thought if I purge, I won't gain weight. And what it really was is avoiding taking responsibility and ownership for what I was doing. And so after about 6 months of that, I was able to stop purging because I was starting to get really worried as how it could impact my heart health and just all kinds of things. And I didn't want to do that. But I still wasn't fully aware that I was binge eating, had a food addiction, all that kind of stuff. So as the year went on, I started to learn a little bit more. I'm like, I think this is what I'm struggling with, but I have no idea why or what to do about it. And what's interesting is when you are in a coping mechanism, even if it's an unhealthy one, we can get into this denial, or my inner critic ego is convincing me, oh, it's not a big deal. Food's your friend. Like, who would you be without it? If you try to change this, who are you going to be without it? Like, you'll be nothing, because I literally revolved my entire world around food when I fell deep into my food addiction. I stopped going out with friends. I stopped my hobbies. Like, it literally was asphyxiating over planning my next binge or my next diet and just going home and like self-sabotaging and checking out with a movie, wishing I was the characters in the movie, right? Like, it was just complete numb out. And so it becomes a comfort zone where you get so familiar with what you're doing that even if you're hurting and harming yourself, it's familiar and comfortable and feels safe. And of course, we know there's a part of the brain called the amygdala that senses discomfort as a threat to our survival. So every time I thought about like trying to maybe deal with it or make change, you'd be like, oh, that feels scary and uncomfortable. I'm just going to stay over here. And then the ego backs up why you shouldn't change. And so I just stayed in this comfort zone of suffering for a while until my low point moment, which was a night that I had finished a binge. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was laying on the couch just in tears, just honestly worried for my life. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to 30. I was only 23, 24 at the time. It's like, I don't know if I'll make it if I keep up this level of destruction with my body, my thoughts, the way I'm taking care of myself, but I don't know how to change it. And then I always had thrown the food away. And that night particularly, after some, of it had digested a bit and settled, I thought, well, if this is the last time I'm going to do this, all or nothing, I'm going to just go grab the cookies out of the garbage and eat them, and then that'll be that. And so I went into my apartment, pulled into the kitchen, pulled out the blue garbage can, I'll never forget, ate the cookies, sat on the floor in just sheer embarrassment, shame, guilt, and shock. Like, how did it get to the point where I am supposedly my glory years in my 20s, which are a roller coaster, actually, not really your glory years in my opinion, but like, I just ate out of my garbage can. Who am I? I'm broke. I have a crappy job. Like, why is all this happening? I'm alone. No, I don't want anyone to know what's going on. I feel so embarrassed about it. It's just like, why is this happening? And then I went out and I threw the food in the dumpster, and then I went out later into the dumpster. So it was like just such a groundbreaking moment for me, because what that experience did was crush my fear of change, crushed the denial that it wasn't a problem and wasn't a big deal, and crushed the fear of the unknown. And in that moment, it catapulted me into this, like, this cannot be my life anymore. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it, but I can no longer afford on any level of my well-being to stay here and to not do anything about it. And that really is what catapulted me onto the healing journey. And it's like I describe it, I felt like I was on the edge of the Amazon jungle with a butter knife getting ready to find my way through, because I knew nothing about any of this. And now I had to embark on the journey, which was a layer of physical awareness and healing, big mental and emotional healing, energetic healing came thereafter, spiritual healing, all the layers. And it was through the next couple of years that I fully healed my relationship with food, fully healed food addiction, emotional eating, binge eating, really learned how to love myself, learned healthy ways to cope, understood what was triggering me and why. And then I was really inspired, thinking, wow, if I struggled with this to the level I did, how many other women are struggling? And it's a huge statistic. It's like 90% of the female population in North America. It's way too many women. And, women were asking me what I was doing and why, and I was starting to share my story. And I'm like, I think I figured out why I went through this. And I want to do this now. I want to help women heal this, because I have the brain of the recovered addict. I know what's going on for them. I can relate to them and be compassionate and empathetic. And I think I can really help them heal. And that birthed a business 12 years ago. And obviously there's lots more bits and pieces, but to keep it as concise as possible, that's what got me into what I do up till this day, 12 years later, into my business.
Thank you for being so transparent, because it's interesting when you say we know 90% of women are dealing with this, but some of the things that you touched upon are so important. Diet, culture, and society. We do not recognize that emotional eating can be the thing because we have been conditioned to think that we're not good enough at restricting our food or eating clean enough. We don't know that emotional eating is an option. We don't know that all the feelings we've been having are an option. We don't know that, like you said, creating your identity from that day you get on the bus or the first time someone makes you feel shameful or guilty for being yourself even.
Yeah.
So I love that. And something else you said, I so agree with you. The 20s are not the glory days. It is not the glory days. I was living in a row house in Norfolk, Virginia, and I was barely like making it through this waitressing bartending job, finishing up college. My roommate was leaving me to get married. I'm trying to get somebody in. It's like the only guy that could move in was a guy that I knew. And I did the same thing. I pulled a bag of potato chips out of the trash can. And I also would get McDonald's, and I was so embarrassed. I would put it in my backpack and walk past my roommates like they couldn't smell it and go to my room and eat it silently in my own little cave so that nobody would know.
Right.
You really hit some things. The thing that also you talked about was when you had the breakup and you lost weight initially. The weird thing is, and after having gone through that many times, but then also a divorce, when I lost all that weight, it was actually not looking healthy, but it was what I had dreamed of. And that's not weight that's sustainable that you can keep off. So when you said that, I know so many women are listening right now. I get that. I've been on that breakup diet before. And it's just not sustainable. I would love to talk about also something you said before we get into the hormones, because it is a hormone, dopamine. How is dopamine and our reception of dopamine connected to the food that we're using to feel good?
Oh my gosh, it's so connected. And I think it's actually funny. I'm so glad you asked this, because the first thing that I started learning about when I started on my healing journey was about the dopamine high and how they literally design food products on purpose to give you the perfect dopamine high to make you addicted and reliant so you won't stop buying them. But dopamine, of course, as we know, is a mood boosting neurotransmitter that the brain produces. And when you, I think I had low dopamine from a young age and I didn't even know. And I think that's one of the biggest issues is it's not being tested for. We don't learn about it. And then we end up in low mood. Again, we don't have healthy ways to cope. I was eating a lot of processed food from a young age, and that fuels inflammation, and inflammation suppresses your dopamine, and then you want to eat it even more, and you need to eat more to get the same high. Or it's really that pleasure euphoric few seconds or minute where you're just, it's this reward response. So it's I would start thinking about, I made in my mind, okay, I'm going to binge. I can't wait, the cookie and the ice cream and the blah and whatever I was going to have. And even just starting to think about it and anticipating it, I would start to produce some dopamine, anticipating the reward of that moment. And I think so many of us get addicted to chasing quick fix dopamine highs, whether it's food or shopping or alcohol or gambling or whatever your method of choice is. And it just becomes this vicious cycle, because whatever we're doing to get the high is also suppressing our levels more. And then we have a generally lower mood. And then we want to reach for these quick fixes instead of learning more mindful, intentional ways to balance our dopamine and our serotonin, our another mood boosting neurotransmitter that the gut produces. And also not knowing how the hormones impact your dopamine, and that if your gut's a mess, which mine was a mess, you're going to have lower levels of these. And so it really just became this chase. And once I made up my mind that I was going to do it, nothing was getting in my way. I would not be able to talk myself out of it until I started really healing. But you become as obsessed with it. And I think the other part of why that is because we have the part of the brain, the pleasure center of the brain called the hippocampus, and we store pleasure memories there. And so even though I felt absolutely horrible after I would binge, the next time I would get triggered, be that my hippocampus is lighting up going, remember how good you felt when you ate that food though? And everything in the world didn't matter and just that moment was so amazing. That's lighting up, plus the desire for the dopamine high. So we have all of these things going on chemically. And then my ego, my inner critic's yeah, go do that. You deserve it. You deserve it. It's all pushing you down that path. It's so easy to give into it.
food is so accessible.
Oh,
that
yeah.
It's almost scary because it is so accessible. I would, even in my pajamas, drive to the gas station
Yeah.
to grab a chocolate bar. And it's funny you said about the hippocampus stores those pleasure memories, because even memories from your childhood, my mom always gave me Hershey bars.
Yeah.
So that's what I would go get, is a king size Hershey bar.
Yeah.
And back then they were actually really big, and I would eat the whole thing in one sitting. And I can so appreciate that. I think also about the dopamine, something you said so fascinating, that anticipatory hit that you know you're going to get, and you're kind of working yourself up to it. But I also think that sometimes we need more and more and more to satisfy that.
100%. Yeah, I went through that. Like, I was to the point where I was binge eating through a whole table full of food. It wasn't just eating one chocolate bar. And I'd go to the organic store. I'd go to the Planet Organic because I was like, oh, at least it's healthier. The ingredients are better. It's like, no, they're not. And like, if you're eating copious amounts of food, it's not healthy anyway. But that's the story I'd convince myself, right? And so, yeah, there'd be like the huge anticipation on the way there. And the more you binge, the more you have to eat to get that same high, and the more heightened those flavors have to be. So more sugar, more salt, more MSG, right, to get that same high. And it's crazy because the other thing too, when you binge, you're likely to eat up to 40% more the next day. And that's because you've skewed your hunger hormones and your appetite levels increase, and your body is also programmed from the caveman days. So your body's like, oh, there must be a famine coming, so we're going to open up extra storage and increase your intake to help you survive. And that's before I knew anything about any of this. It's like, why am I so hungry the next day? I just ate so much. And that was also, for lack of a better word, a mind FUCK, because it was just like, now I'm more hungry and want more. I ate so much and my cravings are worse. Why? Now it's just triggering even more binge eating.
Oh, that's so true. And yes, don't worry about saying that, because that's how we feel. I mean, that is literally
it
how
really
we feel.
was.
Like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
So you mentioned the hunger hormones. This is such a great segue. When midlife women, most of us and a lot of the listeners have either entered perimenopause or they are postmenopausal. So the hormones that we're hearing a lot about are estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. Do know that as the decline happens in our estrogen, all of this gets heightened even more so if you've already been in that pattern.
Yeah.
And some people who haven't been in that pattern are now feeling it because they're having anxious thoughts and they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I really want to get into the hunger hormones. So if you could share about those and really explain how that is affecting what's going on here, because we have this. I always tell my clients and my listeners, it's like whack-a-mole. You have all these hormones and you're like just trying to keep everybody happy, and it's a struggle. But I love your take on this though.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is big. When I learned about this, it was like mind-blowing mic drop moment. I'm like, this makes so much sense. So, and then when you throw hormone imbalances in there, yeah, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, thyroid issues that you don't know about, it just messes us up even more. So we produce ghrelin. It's the hunger hormone that makes us hungry. And so essentially what ends up happening is we go through a series of communications. So your stomach is empty, communicates with your brain. Brain then goes, okay, let's like help you produce this ghrelin and give you this stomach growl. That's a common sign of hunger, right? A stomach growl, or actually getting a hunger signal. These are two common signs that you're properly producing your ghrelin. If you're not properly producing ghrelin, you probably are not going to feel hungry, and you're probably not going to get a stomach growl. Now, there's other hunger cues. I'm sure you talk about them all the time, right? Your blood sugars crash, you're hangry, dizzy, faint, lightheaded, you're shaky, you've waited too long to eat. But specifically, it's the hunger signal and the stomach growl. And what ends up happening is the more we emotionally eat and overeat, the higher our ghrelin production gets. Partially because, like I just said, the body thinks, oh, there must be a famine coming. We have to survive, so let's increase the appetite so they can eat more to store to survive. So we have that aspect of it going on. Another thing people don't realize is especially if you're eating a lot of processed sugar, alcohol, processed carbohydrates, and on top of that, if you've had to take a lot of antibiotics, it really messes up your gut flora And the more gut flora is messed up, like fungal, yeast overgrowth, candida, or other names, that will increase your ghrelin levels, because these, what I call the little yeasty beasties, are like, we want to be fed, and they want to be fed the sugar. And so that can increase your appetite level as well, and make you feel like you've got the hollow leg. When we're fatigued and we don't sleep well, that will increase our ghrelin and make you feel more hungry. That was one of my hardest triggers to overcome. I felt like I had hollow leg and I could just keep eating. And part of it was the fatigue was actually making my cortisol stress hormone high, which is part of what makes the ghrelin levels higher. And then the I don't care, I'm tired, I'm going to eat whatever I want mentality would kick in. But yeah, so I often find there's that increase in ghrelin when we have the gut flora issue. When our cortisol is too high, we have often an increase in appetite level. But what will suppress ghrelin, I often find the first hormone issue I see is the thyroid issue. So hypothyroid, underactive, sluggish thyroid. So your metabolism is sluggish and slowing down. Your thyroid and metabolism are very connected. I just want to make sure you're good with this, me bringing this up, because I feel like so many women are walking around with a thyroid issue and don't even know. And it is impacting your ghrelin.
A lot of women who, it's very often, we don't know, it's the chicken and the egg with perimenopause too. Which one is getting kicked off first? If perimenopause is helping to highlight that issue, or if that started and then, we don't know which one is happening first. But so many women are not getting the full thyroid panel, so they're not really knowing. They're just getting that TSH done. So please bring it up. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I went through this myself. So when I was binge eating, obviously it did a lot of negative impact on my body temporarily, and I ended up with hypothyroid. And so I started gaining weight really easily. My wrists and ankles got really achy. That's a symptom: hair loss, eyebrow thinning, cold hands and feet. You don't feel hungry. Your appetite goes away or gets very diminished. The stomach growl goes away, constipation, anxiety, low mood, low energy in the morning. You don't feel like yourself if your thyroid's off, let me tell you, ladies. And you're right, they only test the TSH, or even if they do the full thyroid panel, one of the blocks I see is that the normal ranges for testing are actually way too big, and you can have hypothyroid in the normal range. And I did, and I was so blessed that when I was starting my recovery, I'd sprained my ankle and I'd found this doctor that was doing this awesome acupuncture. And even though he was a medical doctor, he was very holistically minded. And he started telling me about like my symptoms and, okay, we're going to order this full panel and then we'll go through results together. And I knew nothing about anything at that point. I had not really started my healing yet. And he's like, you have a thyroid issue. I'm like, yeah, but everything's in the normal range. He's like, yeah, no, the normal ranges are way too big. He's like, I've been in practice 25 years. I do this all the time. If you're outside of this little range, you have this issue. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm having all the symptoms, blah, blah, blah. And so he started to help me treat it naturally. And then I dove into the whole realm of hormones. But yeah, to go back to the thyroid, I think it's about women are 8 times more likely than men to have a thyroid issue, and 60% are going undetected. That's way too many, because part of that they're going on the normal range. Like if my TSH goes above a 2, which rarely ever happens, I got all the symptoms back. And the range is like, here in Canada, the range is 0.5 to 6.50 now. It's way too big. Yeah, it used to be 3.5.
Mine crept up, and I was very blessed to have a doctor to let me try to do it naturally first. But when I hit 4, she was like, I'm so sorry, we've got to try the medication until you can get under control. I have a question for you about that. Do you think that anyone can go off of vacation? Yeah. Can you tell what's on my mind right now?
Yeah, totally. It's great.
Do you think someone can go off of medication after they've been on thyroid medication?
I think it's possible in some cases, not if you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis where the thyroid's attacking itself, because that could cause further tissue damage and we don't want to do that. We can significantly bring antibodies down and bring it into remission, and also support the thyroid naturally while being on medication. If you don't have autoimmune issues, I do think that we can play around with balancing it and slowly weaning off medication and monitoring regularly and seeing that things are moving in the right direction, testing, your symptoms are improving. However, before we start reducing medication, we can bring in some natural support, but we've got to heal the relationship with food, work on the gut, and we got to see what else is going on hormonally, and primarily cortisol, stress hormone. If that is way too high or too low, it's going to have a really significant impact on your thyroid function. And trying to come off of medication while having a severe adrenal fatigue or burnout it's not going to work. So I think we have to make sure that the other hormones, including low progesterone, are being properly addressed to set your thyroid up for the best success. and then a slow wean off, and adding in potentially things like desiccated thyroid, more selenium and iodine or whatever, depending on what's going on. But I do think it's possible. I've seen some of my clients do it, and of course they're monitoring with their doctor too, and like everyone's communicating with each other, and some people do need to stay on it. So, but they can lower their dose of medication and again bring in more natural support. I've been able to support mine naturally up until this day from finding out about it in my 20s. But I also monitor very closely, and I know the first signs that it's going off a little bit, and I test right away and adjust protocol and can catch it. And I'm in perimenopause, so it's important to monitor more closely. And thank you.
Fun times. Welcome to the club. Yeah. I love that. And I really also want to validate the gut health issues with ghrelin, because I was having so many issues. I had a gut health series actually, and just was bringing on people talking about it. The constipation. You always think in our positions we're doing all the right things, but it doesn't necessarily mean we are tuning into that one thing. Yeah. And I got tested and I had a parasite. So when I did the cleansing, and there might have even been a little candida or something going on in there too. And when I did the cleanse, sure enough, the cravings that I had during that time, because by the way, parasites and worms, all of that stuff, they love sugar. Candida loves sugar. And as soon as I got rid of it, and it took a while, I had to go through some different things. It's interesting how I didn't have those cravings as much. Yeah. So I love it. Okay, so what's the other hunger hormone? That's the hunger hormone, but what's the other hormone related to our eating?
Yeah, so our hunger hormone that makes, I guess, our fullness hormone is called leptin. And it's the same kind of communication. The stomach's communicating with the brain. Okay, it's filling up. Time for us to produce leptin to give us that fullness signal. And that's why I'm always encouraging people to slow down and eat slowly, because when you eat too quickly and then you stand up and you're like, oh my gosh, I ate way too much, there's your sign that you've overdone it, right? And so what I often see with this in particular is and actually this is for ghrelin as well. So with low stomach acid, we can have increased production of ghrelin. And as well, we can have changes with leptin if our stomach acid is off. So if you've been in the binge purge cycle, if you've been an emotional eater, the likelihood of low stomach acid is quite high. But anyways, so what I find with leptin is we'll produce more of it with a thyroid issue, right? You're full. I haven't eaten in a few hours. I'm not hungry. I guess I don't need to eat, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that's what your body needs, but that's what we're taught. You're not hungry, don't eat. Make sure you get your thyroid tested. Also, with high cortisol or stress hormone imbalance, we often will have a suppressed leptin production, so it's lower. So again, you're not satiated, you're always wanting to eat. Those gut bugs, parasites, candida, that can also suppress the leptin production to make you full, because again, give me all the sugar, give me all the processed carbs. So it's just interesting how some of these hormonal and gut imbalances play such a significant role in actually triggering the cravings that become emotional eating triggers. My candida was one of my worst last triggers because, like you said, the sugar cravings were so intense and I had such an increased appetite level. So I think this is where it's important to understand, like, it's not just you and a habit. Like, there's so much going on in the body that is contributing to that. When leptin levels get too high, because there's that opposing as well, we can have like struggles releasing what I call protection, more fatigue, more inflammation, insulin resistance even. And that all can contribute to, sleep issues and potentially high blood pressure. So it's always so interesting to look at these. And if you're the kind of person that's like, I eat and then I'm full for an hour, but then I'm starving again, or I'm confused. Sometimes I get a hunger signal, sometimes I don't. I think it's actually really important to test leptin, test ghrelin, and see, are they low? Because when we do have a history of binge and emotional eating, we will over time especially really suppress our leptin levels and have a higher likelihood of them being really low, even potentially years later. And that can really, when we have low leptin, you can wake in the night very easily. If you make any change to your supplement regime or your food or workout and you're waking in the night, not only could that be the progesterone or the blood sugar, it could be a low leptin and then low energy levels. Obviously, it can contribute to other hormone imbalances as well, because all of our hormones are connected. I can't believe we have over 50 of them and they're not all talked about. So, and cold intolerance, actually some of the hypothyroid symptoms like hair thinning and cold intolerance are also signs of low leptin, that lack of hunger. And so again, it's so connected to your thyroid. So this is why we've got to be looking at doing the full panels and all the testing to see where are you at, because what if your thyroid's actually not bad, but your leptin's really low from emotionally eating history, and you're like, well, my thyroid's fine, but you don't know, right? So this is why I'm all for investigation. But your hunger hormones are everything. And if they're off, it's just so easy to fuel a cycle of self-sabotage because they're literally calling the shots. Or if you wait too long to eat because you're not hungry, quote unquote, that can easily trigger overeating or binging later in the day, like you probably already talk about, right? Like it just becomes such a cycle.
It becomes a really tough cycle. And it's interesting about us having habits over the years that might have changed our ghrelin and leptin levels. And it makes me think about the time before I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, where I thought I was a really good intermittent faster. I was that girl that would have the cup of coffee before I knew better and wouldn't eat until 11 or 12. And we talk about that a little bit more. I think our world is opening up to women and hormones and how that's not really necessarily the best thing for us. But I thought I was so good at it. You know, it made me feel so powerful to not have that hunger. But then, of course, exactly what you said, evening would come and I would just demolish the pantry and the fridge. So, well, let's take a turn from the hormones to the inner world for a second.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned in your journey the ego mind. And just to make sure that everyone understands before or whenever you feel like it fits in, we want to talk about how does that relate to the emotional eating, our feelings, our shame, our guilt. But what is the ego mind?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's everything really. So your ego mind, or I call it the inner critic as well, lives in the mind, and it is not the true you. The true you actually lives in your heart. But the ego mind is the analytical, critical, comparer, the jealous, the part of you that convinces you you're never going to be good enough. You don't have enough willpower. You just need to try harder on your diet. It's the part of you that makes you feel all the negative emotions, the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment, anger, frustration, criticism, judgment, sadness. And yes, we're going to feel a wide array of emotions, but it thrives off your suffering and it wants to stay in control. It will justify why you should binge and then shame you for doing it. It will make you be critical of your weight, convince you why you shouldn't stop people pleasing because God forbid anyone gets upset with you. It's really like the belittling, disempowering voice in the mind, versus when we're in our power in our hearts and we're really in alignment. This is where the love, claiming our worth, joy, happiness, gratitude, optimism, power. It's safe to set boundaries. I love myself. Like, wow, I binged. Let me forgive myself. Look at what happened and let it go and move on, right? Like this is the kind of mentality and energy we start to get into. But the inner critic the ego will never cheer you on. And it's so tied to binge and emotional eating because it literally will try to convince you to do it. Because like I said, it thrives off of your suffering, and then it will shame you for getting into the behavior. And the more in our head we are, the easier it is to go to food, because it's very uncomfortable and emotional and exhausting to continue to hear that voice over and over, essentially be like the drill sergeant that's just like, you shouldn't have eaten that, you should have worked out harder, you know, you're not doing a good enough job and you're going to binge again. And oh, if you overeat with your friends, it doesn't count as binge eating. So do more of that. And like, it's just the enabler to all the misaligned things. And I think one of the reasons that I was binge eating anyway was because I didn't yet know that that was not the real me. And I was like, I don't want to hear this anymore. And the only thing that helps tame it for a few minutes is if I, suppress it and numb it down. And this voice is really birthed age 0 to 7 when we get programmed and we take on the most of our beliefs, behaviors, habits, thoughts through the way we're conditioned, the experiences we have as we're brought up. The subconscious mind is fully open, taking everything in around us. And that's part of what births the ego mind is. And what's interesting about the ego mind, it's actually your wounded inner child that hasn't been healed. And that's why when we have certain circumstances, interactions come up when we get really upset or triggered, or that person and they upset me and this thing and that, or this reminded me of this and now I'm upset. Often it's because we haven't gone in and done the deeper healing to actually acknowledge we have an inner child, that she's been in there hurt for years or decades and no one's gone in to tend to her. And these are the insecurities that keep fueling this inner critic in the mind, the ego. At the end of the day, your ego is going to be one of your biggest teachers, because once you learn the difference between being in your power and giving it away to it, you'll learn how to manage your ego and take your power back. Unless you become enlightened, you will have an ego for your full life. However, it gets a lot quieter. And I think there's just so much emotional and energetic mastery when we learn from our egos of like, oh, here's an insecurity I haven't fully healed. Let me work on it. And then it gets quieter.
That's powerful. I think too, as we move into our 40s, 50s, 60s, there is we are changing. We are letting go of what other people think of us.
Yeah.
And us doing the right thing and the perfection, kind of, because we do get triggered. And I think the other part of it is we are luckily, and maybe this is due to social media, maybe this is, just due to a little bit more awareness. I think people are more open to digging deeper if they know.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you don't know, then you don't know to dig back and say, oh, the reason why I'm eating is because someone said something mean to me and at 7, I never could meet their expectations.
Yeah, totally.
Or I'm always apologizing because I had to avoid conflict at 10 years old all the time.
Yeah.
Or whatever the situation is. So I love that. And I love that we can call it the ego. And it reminds me too of really ego being of the world, really. As opposed to our true, authentic selves that we don't always get to fully meet until we work on it.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's why the inner work is so powerful, because as long as we're distracted by the diet, the quick fix, the next shiny weight loss gimmick, we stay detached from our true power, and the ego is going to be in full blown control, criticizing you because you're not losing the weight fast enough. You lost control of food again. There's something wrong with you? You can't figure this out. When really all those quick fixes are keeping you disconnected from going inward and doing the healing that is going to give you the change that you want.
Yes, that disconnection. That is really the disconnect.
Yeah.
I really love that thought. I would also love to talk about, I have people in my client world that I would call them empathic, very empathic people.
Yeah.
And we hear that word a lot. We hear empath, we hear it online, and I'm not sure everyone really understands what that is. When someone is an empath, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so it means that you are a very energetically and emotionally sensitive being. And to be honest with you, all humans are, but a lot of them have it shut off or cut off or are not able to tap into it. And when you're in binge and emotional eating behavior, you are numbing it out because it's uncomfortable to feel. It can be a lot. And I'm a very sensitive empath. And so what happens when you're an empath is you can feel other people's emotions, even if they're not in the same room. You can feel the collective of the world, the town you live in, the country that you live in. And if it's a intense day, like it was here on Monday when we had our election, like, my gosh, as the day went on, I could feel the collective getting more and more intense. And even though I was doing all my stuff, I'm like, it feels pretty uncomfortable today. I'm just going to have to surrender because even all my usual tools are not doing the trick. So I'm just going to surrender. It's okay if it feels uncomfortable. But also, people feel called to talk to you and pour their hearts out to you and dump all their stuff on you, and you listen and you're so sweet. But then when you leave the conversation, you go home with all their baggage, and now you feel their anger, you feel their pain, you feel their frustration, their fear, their worry. And that will trigger you to emotionally eat or binge because it's really uncomfortable to take all that on and feel that. Or maybe you have people that really know how to overstep your boundaries, push your buttons, take advantage of you. And they essentially are called energy vampires, and they suck the life out of you. And you wonder why you feel drained after spending time with them. We often lack boundaries as empaths. We struggle to say no because we want everyone to like us. And often we don't have a good energy hygiene practice to help protect our energy field, and keep it clean and clear so that we can feel more emotionally and energetically grounded. So we end up binge eating or emotional eating because our energy is actually kind of almost like up in our head and out of our body. And that's what it would feel like. It was like, oh, I'm going to binge and then it'll bring my energy back in and more awareness, and it never would. But I think we're not taught about this, and it's kind of like oh yeah, you're weird if you're an empath. No, it's a gift to be an empath. It's very powerful. It's a great way to access your intuition when you can feel things. But I just think that we're not taught what it is or how to deal with it. But I think that's why your journey with healing your relationship with food is so powerful, because you awaken to all these gifts that you have and all these these aspects of yourself that make you who you really are. And you get to really learn how to embrace and love them and how to manage certain parts of them so it's not so overwhelming. Because otherwise you just get really overwhelmed feeling everything. And then of course, as we know, overwhelm is a huge emotional eating trigger, and just you want to numb everything out.
You just gave so many women a gift, because I think we feel flawed when we feel like the energy is sucked out of us when we are there for other people all the time. And again, yes, we feel like we're a failure because we go home, we don't understand that the food is bringing us down. It's funny how you just said, too, I never even made that connection about the energy being here. And it truly is wanting to be grounded and have everything back inside. And it's around safety, too. I feel like one of the biggest things is feeling safe in our bodies, safe in our heads. So you just gifted something to a lot of people who didn't understand that that's what they were dealing with.
Yeah. And it is, you feel like you're crazy because you're like, you wake up and you're having a good day and all of a sudden, boom, you feel anger, you feel fear, you feel anxiety. And you're like, what the heck? Like nothing happened to make me feel like this. Well, you could have gone to the grocery store and walked by someone and picked up what is called their emotional residue, and they're having a bad day and they emit all this negative emotion, which is invisible. You can't see it, but you feel it. And now you're going, what's wrong with me? And it's like, we have to be, this is where healing is so important, because you can get quiet and go, is this mine? What I'm feeling actually mine, or did I take it on from someone else? And that's power, because when you can figure out what's yours and what isn't, again, it helps you not go into that I'm crazy, there's something wrong with me, whatever that narrative is. And then you can work through and process through whatever it is. And we are intuitive beings, and women are very in tune and very gifted. And I think part of embracing these parts of us and learning how to manage them just brings us back into our identity. And you know, you don't want to hurt yourself with food when you learn how to manage it. You want to amplify these gifts, because, you know, when it comes to energy, the more we self-sabotage, the lower our frequency, because we're feeling all these dense, heavy emotions, shame, guilt, anger, self-hatred. And the lower our vibration, the more negative things we may attract into our lives, more bills, more debt, fender benders, unhealthy relationships. As well, we can end up in looping behavior, which means it's like what I would do. I would binge, and then I would message a friend or an ex-boyfriend that I knew wasn't good for me and get some validation and attention, more unhealthy behaviors. And then I'd go online and mindlessly buy things I didn't need. And like, then it would rack up my debt, and like, it just spirals all these looping behaviors when we're in these low frequencies. So learning about the energetic components of emotional eating in our behaviors, I think, is so powerful, because it is a huge part of who we are.
It is. I'm glad you brought that in, because the energy portion of it is so huge. So if you could, just 2 to 3 things, what are a few things for women who are just starting to discover they are on this emotional eating journey? You've opened up so many doors today of things that may be happening with them that they need to get checked out. Do you have a couple tips that you could leave with everyone to move forward? And, you know, especially if someone is just really breaking open right now, and all the light bulbs are coming on now because of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you're not alone. It's not your fault. Try not to be so hard on yourself about what's been going on, because it's so much bigger and complex than you can fathom at this point. It's not your fault. I think the next thing is starting to become aware of what's triggering you to emotionally eat or binge, because how can you resolve the triggers if you don't know what they are? So even if you do end up giving into one of them, afterward, be willing to take 5 or 10 minutes and reflect upon why did I do this? What happened? Because that's going to help you build awareness around your triggers. And then I think a third really powerful thing is starting to ask yourself before you go to food, is this physical or emotional hunger? Because they're very different. And if you don't have a hunger signal, please get your hormones tested and like investigate that stuff so you can sort that out and then have more clarity. And then I think be willing to take the time you need to take to be on your journey. And, you know, it's taken you years or decades to get to this point. It's going to take more than a week, a month, a few months to fully resolve this, but it's the most fulfilling work and journey you will ever go on, and it will give you more than you can ever imagine in your life. So be willing to stick with it, because you will gain the freedom.
Amber, those are amazing tips, because it is so much more than just the body and just the dieting, the things emotionally and mentally, health-wise, energetically that they will get. So thank you for those tips. You are so educated, you are so in tune and so compassionate, and I know your clients are very blessed. So we are blessed that you are here today. will you tell everyone where they can find you and remind them about your podcast?
Yeah, and thank you. You're so sweet. I love your energy. It's so beautiful. So the podcast is the No Sugarcoating Podcast. It's available everywhere. The website is amberapproved.ca. So if you want to go and check out more resources, you want to learn more about if you're struggling with emotional eating, the empath piece, all of it, you can check that out. And if you want to reach out for support, there's an opportunity to book a consultation. But I just really think when I'm on social, YouTube and Instagram, it's my name, Amber Romaniuk, Romaniuk. But yeah, you're not alone, and we're here to help you, both of us, right? Like we're proof you can heal. And that's my final message.
I love that. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, make sure that you nourish your entire life and give yourself grace today.